Welcome to the show, everyone. My guest today is Gene Bernier. So Gene and I connected online on LinkedIn like about a year ago, I guess. And there was a few mutual contacts that we have. He's actually local here in Kelowna, so I'm actually across the lake, but we're fairly local. And he has joined us in the river before. So we do our Cold Plunge Truth every Wednesday. Gene was one of our guests. And I remember the conversation that we had both before and in and after being in that river and just thinking like, man, this guy's deep. Like he's got some wisdom to share, but he's also got a humbleness to him that actually just feels really genuine and authentic. And I was looking forward to the conversation that we would have and diving deep on that. Like what brought Gene to this place? How does he use these gifts and this kind of this sense and this presence to be able to serve others? And we spoke about his journey as a coach of others, of leaders, of entrepreneurs, and what he's done to build that skill set over the years and the lessons that he's learned and what he's integrated into his own life. And it was an amazing, inspiring conversation. I think everybody will get a lot of value out of that. But I think the thing that's most exciting about this interview and this podcast episode is that I actually leaned into asking him a question that I've maybe been a little hesitant on in the past, but Gene actually kind of set the context and gave me the space to be able to comfortably do it, which I'm very grateful for. And that question was, where is he misaligned or not of integrity with the person that has been speaking for the last 40 minutes or so on this podcast? Meaning, we speak a lot of times from a place of this is how we should be. And these are the lessons that I've learned over the years. And this is what you should do. And then when we actually like flip that mirror around and go, now, how are you doing? Are you being that all the time? Or are you just saying it out loud? Where are you misaligned? Be honest with yourself. And Gene leaned into this with me and he answered the question very honestly and vulnerably and truthfully. And it was a reflection moment for him to just realize the growth that he's experienced to get to here, but also where he wants to continue to evolve. And we both had an experience of growth, right? Because naturally, like I say, I haven't asked that kind of a question before because for the reason, like we were saying, that oh, geez, what if the person doesn't really know how to answer that question? Or what if they don't really lean into telling the truth? Because we always want to kind of sugarcoat yeah, geez, I really should be getting up earlier in the morning. Okay, that's surface level. But like, where are you truly misaligned? Like, where are you telling yourself that, oh, family first, family means everything, but then you work 16 hours a day? And I'm saying that from my own perspective, because that's a misalignment for me. And it's gone through ebbs and flows where I've been very attentive and very, present with my family and my kids and my wife. And then there's times where I just straight up go into old patterns and I work like 16 hours a day and I'm up until midnight and all of these things that I know don't serve me. And I actually speak about them, but I've been misaligned on them in the past. And this isn't to like put ourselves down and to say, shame on you, but rather to go, here's the truth. I recognize it. I surrender to it. And now I'm going to choose to move in a different direction. I'm going to choose to operate in a different way, to be a different person. It was fun. It was a lot of fun, this conversation. I think you're going to really enjoy this. I think you're going to enjoy hearing from Gene and the vulnerability and the honesty that he showed up with. And I encourage you to go and connect with him as well, because he's sharing a lot of content around these things too. And I believe that both of us actually unlocked a whole new level and layer to the depth of conversations and the content that we'll create going forward. So let's go ahead and give it a listen. And here we go. All right, Mr. Gene Bernier. Good to see you again, my friend.
Always great to see you, Trevor. Thanks for having me on your show this time.
Yeah, of course. Well, we have known of each other and kind of connected in the online space, LinkedIn in particular, within the last year or so, I would say. We had some mutual contacts and whatnots. And I think we were both kind of vibing with what each one of us was talking about and consuming each other's content along the way. And yeah, I'm grateful we got connected, man. Like sometimes when you find your people, you maybe hesitate for a little bit because you're like, well, I don't know, am I going to like this
you
guy? Is he
feel
gonna
each
like...
other out.
Yeah, right? It's funny how that dance works, right? But common interests, people in common, I think, kind of break those barriers down. And we definitely had a few of those along the way.
I agree. And I'm still grateful. I think it was Danielle who's still... and what post? I think we were talking about some posts about hiking that we were sharing. She's like, "Come to the cold plunge with Trevor and Mike," and it's just like, I've never met these people in real life. Now let's go jump into a cold creek, and the bond was formed.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a gentle peer pressure, as we expressed, right? It was funny how that all transpires, but. Hey, that's the truth, though, is I did see that post where you were talking about hiking up Knox Mountain, I guess it was, here in Kelowna, right? Because we're in the same area. And that's always the things, right? If you're like, oh, that person was up at 5 a.m. and hiked a mountain. I like that guy. I think we might hang out. The littlest things.
And it's interesting, though, when you go do those things others might think are like, well, that's crazy. Why are you doing that? And then all of a sudden you start to slowly find... the people are like, I'm doing that as too. Should we do that together? Be like, oh, all the crazy people are getting together. I love it.
Yeah, totally. And actually, on that note, so I'm going to ground us really quickly in a quote by Brene Brown, just to kind of set the context for this call. Because you asked me before, like, what's the intention? What's your intention, Trevor, here? Well, I'll explain. I say this to everybody when we get rolling here. You might have even heard it before, but... she said, one day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be somebody else's survival guide. So that is our grounding. And the other thing I wanted to say about that, though, too, is I actually listened to Brene Brown's new book, Braving the Wilderness, over the weekend. I listened to it on audio, which was a really quick listen, actually. It was like 4.5 hours. But she talked about that exact thing you just said, which is sometimes when we venture into this space of the unknown, like hiking a mountain in the morning or jumping into a cold river, there's a part of us that thinks like, am I insane for doing this? I feel like this is the way. And then all of a sudden you get in the river or you jump into the wilderness and you see all these people and they're just living their best life and they're doing cool shit and they're creating their reality. And you're like, damn. But you had to actually be brave enough to venture into the wilderness. And it's an amazing book, man. I don't know if you've listened to it or read it yet.
I haven't yet, but I'm going to add it to my list. I've still got one Audible credit left that just came online. So that might be the add to it. Yeah.
No, for sure. I highly recommend it. And I was going to say, I've got like 12 credits because I haven't used them, but I have a subscription. So if you need it, I'll just gift it to you as well. But let's maybe begin with something like that, because I want to introduce you to everybody that is, in my world and get them to get a sense of like who you are. But, why do you hike mountains, man? Why did you decide to take the leap and jump into a cold plunge? Why does what I just said about Brene there kind of make you perk up and go, cool, I'm all in?
So why do I do that stuff? I think there's a piece that is always looking to explore, right? There's like an unsettled being settled. I never really put those words to it before, but that really resonates here in this moment is when I get comfortable, there's a sense of boredom. And then it's just like, okay, how do I unboard this? Like, what does this boredom really mean? Do I want to sit in it? Do I want to explore it? And getting up at like sometimes at 5 a.m. to go hiking is because it's difficult to do. And I'll scratch that. I know I need to do those difficult things because it makes me know that I'm alive, that I can overcome the momentum of being slow sometimes as well, or like being in a position that you've grown to and you've really excelled in, be like, do I still have it in me to take another step? And can that step be big, bold, and curious?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of metaphors in that are not just the physical stuff too, right? And I know in the line of work that you do and the people that you serve and how you choose to spend your time in creating, right? Because you do a show, you create a lot of content. Yeah. what does that journey look like for you? This is basically kind of like an open platform now to say, like, who is Gene? what do you do, man? Like, because you asked me before, even last week, because we had to reschedule this, but you're like, hey, do you want my bio or something, anything to prep? And I was like, no, dude, let's just come and talk, you know?
Yeah.
Like, who's the real Gene? Why are you here right now? Why are we even having this conversation, you know?
Well, I can answer that question the easiest. Why are we having this question? Why? Because there's something about the conversations we've already had, Trevor, which are more than surface level talk, right? Like, we get to have an exploration of minds, being people that were new to one another, but like I think there's something fun about that too, right? Is being able to share when people are in that like crazy 5 a.m, get up and do wild stuff, adventure set. Like, that just makes it a yes, because you just never know where anything's going to go. I've got a friend, Tom Broxham from New Zealand. He's an expat from Calgary, and he always sees, and his motto is today's connections, tomorrow's opportunity. And there's just something that always sits with that. There's a component of being willing to step into it. So the easy answer for that is, why am I here? To be brave and be bold and be curious with you, man. Who am I? So there's a couple of words that are right super pumped up there. I love to be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
So who am I? Well, I'm Gene. But what I do sometimes as my day job is I work with really awesome leaders who kind of gotten stuck. I call it like being trapped in the fog. You know, like when you've gone along, you've been really good at something, and now you're starting to make this transition from going from here where you've got a set skills of mastery, but now you got to change. Maybe it's most likely these people are stepping into leadership roles. And that stretch can sometimes feel like they're being put back in the unknown. And that can be a real difficult spot to be in after being a master at your craft for a long time, going into a new one, trying to flip back into being almost having to be a student again, to learn to be okay with making the mistakes and being messy and not getting it right, and helping them find the way to kind of unblock that energy around what's holding them in place in that fog, which is judgment, fear. Our friends' anxiety and depression can show up, but it's helping coach them through that, sit with it, explore it, look at the different perspectives around it, right? And eventually they're able to get through it. And also look back and go, the fog is an incredible teacher. It's necessary. The fog teaches you what you need to know to get from here to there. But we can also speed that transition up so that you're not stuck in it and you're in it for only as long as you need to learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting that we kind of begin with this side of things with regards to what do you do, you know, because that's always, I find myself personally even too, I've started to really have a different relationship to a question like that. And I'm always curious how other people will answer it, right? Because some people immediately go, well, this is my title and this is the degrees that I have and this is the companies I've worked for. And others will lean in and go, you know, I help people that are in the fog realize that the fog's actually exactly where you're supposed to be. Learn to love it, embrace it, thrive in it, and everything you want is on the other side. Because that's what I heard you say, you know?
Oh, man. Like, I'm going to write that down afterwards. Like, Trevor just repeated that so much smoother than I have. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, asking the what do you do question has gotten to this point of like, it's like almost grinds. It's just like, I'm really trying to be versus do.
Yeah, and I think that's ethereal and hard for people to wrap their heads around unless they've really dove into that uncomfortable space and have guides to support them on it too. Because I know, in fact, I'd be curious to know this too. When people come into your world and you are supporting them in a coaching capacity, are they cracked wide open and they're like, Gene, just guide me. I'll go whatever direction you ask me to, or is there resistance, or what's been your experience?
Oh, it's interesting. I think that to be in a position where you're asking for help, there's a component of like the crack has started to happen. Like you think like, oh, I'm being cracked open, and you don't realize that like life and you, it's kind of like a gobstopper. Be like, that's just layer one, and there's so many more layers, and each one has to have that resistance, and together it's a bit of like hitting that and opening the crack together, through this place of non-judgment and just being with it. And sometimes it's like, it's messy and it's terrifying, and hitting it over and over again can feel futile till that one crack, and it's just like, oh, I didn't realize there was another layer down here. So the answer is to yes and no, right? To step into it takes a bit of like self-awareness, and people that are ready to make that step to be, I think into therapy, into coaching, into mentorship, or whatever the next step for them is. And then inside of that is a lot of tension and resistance and places to go that have been stacked onto us, right? Like I'm 42 and I'm just starting to understand where my layers are, and realizing there's so many more to go.
Yeah. That was actually what I was going to ask you next. See how we're just kind of like dancing into this perfect conversation, which was like, where have you metaphorically thrown yourself into the fog on purpose to be able to go, I don't even know exactly what I'm supposed to be asking for questions, but it feels scary and I'm going to jump. What can yeah, I'll just let you answer that.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Well, the low-hanging fruit one was starting the livecast conversations with, which is the show that I've had both you and Mike on before. Yeah. That was a place of me going, all right, I've always wanted to do a podcast because I think it'd be fun, but it's also a place of growth. And it was also a thing I didn't do for the longest time because like, oh, what if I'm not good at asking questions? What if my voice isn't good enough? And I got to this point in, I think it was October 2020, and a friend of mine had just started doing like live shows, and he's just like, why don't you just like hit record or like hit go live in Zoom? I'm like, nah, it can't be that easy. He's like, it's that easy, man.
It's literally that easy.
And I had to like reevaluate what was really stopping me, because as a tech background, it wasn't the tech that was stopping me. Like that was the easy part. It was coming to terms with going, okay, show number one is going to be the best show that I've ever done, and by show number two, it's going to be the worst show that I've ever done. Making that commitment to evolve it. And I made a commitment to myself, like, if I just get started, what could I accomplish if I just increase and improve one little thing? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have, like, no, sometimes nobody will ever see the different little operating pieces I've done to make it better I'm filming 100 tomorrow, right? Wow. So like, it's all these little pieces have built up. And then it was just like, oh, I got to 5. Now what could I do if I get to 10? What could I do if I get to 25? And then it became this place of, could I get to a point that people leave this show and go, that was a great conversation? Mm-hmm. Can I push beyond that feeling of like getting to like 90% and stopping? So for me, it was like 25. And then I'm like, oh, I think I could get to 50. And once I got to 50, I'm like, I'm going to get to 100. And just putting myself in that uncomfortable place of like continuing to do it every Wednesday for 100 shows. Yeah. Just for the experience, just to learn, to figure out that answer of like, who am I trying to be? Who's Gene being now, and who's he growing into? And through all those conversations, I've learned to ask questions like this. First, I think about 60 of them, 70 of them, I would ask, we're going to jump in my time machine, go back 10 years. Yeah. What's the one piece of advice you're going to give? Yeah. And that kind of got to a point where I was like, I think that's a good question, but like, that's not pulling people forward. So we switched it now to going 10 years into the future. So what's the thing future you is saying thank you to you for when you step out that door, right? Is like, where's this place? Where can we start asking questions that people can move forward from instead of like looking back to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a super insightful conversation that we both, Mike Prince and I, had with you. And I remember that question, and I even knew it was coming. And then when he asked it, I was like, what is the answer? And part of me has been conditioning myself to just go, you know the answer. You're just scared to say it out loud. So just say it, you know? And for me, I can't, I was just trying to remember exactly what I said, but I think it was somewhere around the lines of, my future self is thanking me for believing that what exists now actually was always there. I just had to believe it was true. It was something to that degree.
Something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I've been on lots of podcast interviews, and I know exactly the evolution you're talking about too. In fact, I'm looking at some notes here where I've got the evolution of my questions since I've started, and I'm on episode, I think this will be 60 or so. And yeah, it's come so far, right? And a lot of times I think the reason why we maybe don't evolve to such deep questions that have open-ended possibilities for answers is because of the uncomfortable space that it might create. At least I'm speaking from my own perspective. And that was going back to what you were saying of like, am I any good at this? Can I ask the right questions? Am I going to be able to ask a question and hold the space for a person where they're like, great question, and not try and fill the air? Does that resonate with you at all? Oh,
big time, right? There was a huge part. I can still remember like the first, like that throws me back to the first 25. It's like, don't let there be dead air. And there was like always trying to fill it. And it finally got to this point. Somewhere in that first 25, I just start to relax and to go with it. Be like, all right, well, if they're brave enough to be here and I'm brave enough to be here, let's just trust and set the context of every show that we're going to hit 40 minutes. Mm. And we're going to explore that, and we can hold a conversation for that. And it's okay for some time to sit and ponder and even to be like, where's the next thing? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Just kind of let it flow, right? And there, like the piece of that as well is like, I think there's a big component of that permission to give to a guest and like give to a client or wherever it is. But in this case, it was like, hey, I usually lose track of time. We're going to I'm going to look up and we're going to be wildly past 40 minutes. And I say that now. And that was like something that evolved from that first 25. And now I say that every time, and we do it every time. And it's almost like, oh, it's okay that we're going to go longer. And then I make a bit of a joke of going, it's my fault that we've gone long and I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah.
And I've hit that. I think maybe there's 2 shows that I have never hit that mark with since that time. And then there's been a couple that have just like gone off, like from like probably could have sliced them into 2 or 3 shows.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah, it's funny how that happens too, right? I know even my podcast, every single episode's between 55 to 62 minutes, I want to say. It's never pre-planned. It just kind of naturally happens that way. And there's times where you think like, geez, I'm already 3/4 of the way through the questions I had written down. We're going to be able to keep going. But then, you just have to get kind of comfortable in that space and be a good listener, I think, too. Like, pick up on little cues to know where the conversation could go if you just go a little deeper, And I think that's a sign of a great coach, too. What's been your experience with that? And I know you've gone through lots of trainings and stuff to, like, really work the skill of being a coach that can hold that kind of space. But, yeah, what kind of, what's been your experience with that? And
with listening. So yeah. So I'm going through something called Coactive Training Institute, CTI, for those in the coaching world. I'm halfway through my certification process now. So I've spent like the last year doing some training with this group. And a big part of what they talk about is level 1, level 2, and level 3 listening. So level 1 listening is really self-based. It's just like, it's like if I was listening to you, I'd be thinking about, how am I going to reflect with a story that matches Trevor? Or how is what Trevor's saying making me feel? Level 2 is like really listening to the words that are coming out and connecting with your words. Level 3 is like taking basically that whole wide world view in, connecting not just with the words, but like your energy and being bold and saying, hey, this is what's coming up. I'm feeling fill in the blank. Where does that sit? And being able to create this like shared conversation at level 3. It's really beyond kind of being heard at that point. It's like interesting. It's like being witnessed. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with Philip McKernan?
I'm not. No.
He's He's a speaker and a coach and a retreat facilitator. And I've known of him for about 12 years now and spoken a few times years and years ago. He actually runs a few things. One's called Brave Soul, Brave something else is like 7-day retreats in Ireland. But anyways, he was just on a podcast with somebody who's from Kelowna, I believe, too. I got to go and look this up. The heck was her? The Soulful Girl or something like that podcast. Anyways,
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, I know. There's all the kinds of things. I'll link all these up for people because it was a reminder of like, oh yeah, I was going to go look that up. But anyways, she was interviewing Philip and talking about being in the crowd with him, speaking on stage with about 3,000 people there, and just his energy, like you were talking about. She said in the first 5 minutes she heard him talk, she was like, oh shit, my life is never going to be the same again after listening to this guy. And then she sunk down in her seat because she's like, I cannot have this person actually see me for who I am right now and how I see myself, because they're going to see right through me. And I was like, whoa, that's powerful, you know?
That is powerful.
And that's an energy game, right? Speaking from the stage and really having that kind of an impact on somebody, not just with the words you say, but like how you show up and just the aura around you. And then the second part of that, related to what you were saying too, was she talked about an experience being in one of his retreats and how there was like 20 people at this retreat and somebody had a breakdown, for lack of a better phrase, you know, at the very start, you know. So part of it was kind of like a happy breakdown, and another part was kind of like an angry breakdown, like, I'm going to butt heads with you, Philip, right? And Philip held space for that person for 2 hours, she said. And there was everybody around that person wanting to hand a tissue over, give a hug. And he said, do not do that. This person gets to feel this, perhaps for the first time in their life. And I remembered hearing that and being like, whoa, that's a next level of being able to hold space and to coach and to guide. I just wanted to say that out loud, man, because it just seems so relevant to what we were talking about. And I've really appreciated our conversations and what you've acquired for skills, but I think also intuitively have as just a deep down, you know, soul aspect of you, is you have a really amazing presence to allow people to be heard, but then to provide some insight back that isn't you telling them what to do, but rather having them reflect. And I just experienced that at the river when we went and cold plunged. That's where you get the truth out of people.
Well, when you have to sit in that cold, you may as well be present because there's no other place to be. But I think there's something to take it back to that experience that Philip shared for that person. Is like, that is so important. And you hit it nail on the head. It's like, so many of us are so busy trying to be busy, and we don't have time for our feelings. We don't have time to take care of ourselves. And then we wonder why things start to fall apart, right? Like living that life, super short runway before everything starts to fall apart. And it'll start slowly, and then it'll just escalate super quick. And being able to create that space, like even I'll share for myself, like today, like I work with my own coach, especially as I'm going through my own training and stuff. Like I eat my own dog food. And we were talking about how she reflected, going, you really process through our topic today quite quickly. And I reflected back, going, it's about the space. It's not so much about like what she said or how she made a question or a reflection, but it was like the space to explore without there being judgment and being able just to feel into it. And I've had a couple clients over the last number of weeks share back and reflect back about how they felt that in our sessions, and then been able to take that into like their business or into their family life and just hold like where they typically like, I want to go in and like hug or fight, or like, it's just like, no, like step back and go,
yeah,
maybe this person has not felt like they've been allowed to feel this emotion. And all the emotions we have, they're part of us. They're legit. And we need to experience them. The breakdowns, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly, as my friend Raul James always says, is like, we have to experience it all to be full. And like when you have that opportunity to just be like, I could be like that, and there's still love and compassion around me, be like, man, like that's a place that you do have a breakdown. That's where tears come from. That is like where a layer just breaks and shatters, and you are never the same in a great way.
Yeah, and you didn't even know it was there, right? It was just kind of deep under the surface, but giving yourself permission to go to that space is the first step. It actually reminds me of something else too. This morning I just walked over to the Starbucks because I've been making a point to get up in the morning, just go for a walk, sit down. Just been doing like a walking meditation and then journaling and whatnot. And one of the things that came across my environment at the time was to be mindful in every moment too, including when you have that glass of water and it's easy to just down it and back to your thing, and instead enjoy every ounce of that water and look out the window and look at the mountains and go, man, I'm grateful to be here right now. It was a powerful moments, man, for me. And that's why I think what you're speaking about too is that mindfulness in the moment, you know?
Yeah, like I'll just go like ditto for that. I've been experiencing and practicing that myself as like one of my own personal areas of working is this slowdown. It's like, so what's in the slowdown? What is if I take a little bit slower breath, and what if I speak just a little bit slower to create some space for something beautiful like to come out of it? And like just like this morning after working out, sitting outside and like just looking at the leaves and not like looking through them, but like trying to look at each individual leaf and just try to hear it and experience it and be in that moment. The more opportunities you can take for that is like, it's almost like, it's like your soul just gets to take a beat for a minute and just be like, we're not worrying about yesterday. We're not fretting about tomorrow. I just get to show up. And this is totally all right.
Yeah. Right here, right now. And I have seen you speaking about some of that stuff. It was on my mind subconsciously, maybe because I wasn't planning on actually bringing that up. But I have seen you share some stuff like that recently, even too, about just present moments and sitting in the calm, in the silence. And this kind of conversation, because I know that on the surface level of people read your LinkedIn profile or whatever, you know, it's like I have this certification. These are my qualifications. This is my background and experience. I even host a show on this, and this is why I could be a good guide and a coach and a mentor for you. But what we're talking about, I think, and you and I kind of jammed on this after we went in the cold plunge, is like this right here, what we're talking about is actually the secret, the magic sauce.
Oh, big time.
And it's really simple.
Yeah, this is where... and that's, you know, I laugh because that's the part that you might not believe if you haven't like started to crack through those layers. It's like, it can't be that simple. It's got to be this complex thing. It's got to have all these moving parts. Be like, no, reduce the parts.
Yeah.
Reduce the rules. Start living around guidelines. It's like, how do you simplify your life? It's like, what is it? I don't know if this was a joke but I remember, you know, a father of like 16 getting interviewed. And he's like, well, what would you tell yourself if you could go back in time? He's just like, have less rules. Because life comes at you. So how are you going to show up with it? It's like, I keep going back to your be grateful, be curious, be brave. It's like, have some guidelines about what it means to be you in those moments, and then show up and react to it from those places versus like, I've set up all these strict rules and, oh no, this new situation means I got to revamp this rule. Be like, no, who do you want to be? You're a human being, not a human doing, right? So get connected with that being. And that's a real hard place at the start to get into it. That's where you have those 2 hours of like just being witnessed and allowing yourself to go through the breakdown and the transformation. And that's what it is. And like every transformation is painful. There's a component of pain. I think there's also a component within that pain is a piece of grief. Right? Because the piece of you that got you to where you are, that needs to be honored, but you're also letting it go. And it's like a part of that is dying. It is dead, right? And just experiencing that grief of it and still celebrating the life that you're about to create and move forward from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of good messages in there, and we're very aligned on everything that we're talking about here. I'm in the middle of it. I know you are constantly too, because that's another piece of it too, is like you never master this. You just become a constant student of it, right? And a committed student at that, seeking the fog for the next evolution, the next rise. The thing that comes to mind now is I know a little bit about the dynamics of your personal, like as a dad, as a father. You just mentioned about, you know, being a dad and stuff, but how does this show up for you as a dad, knowing that, you know, you're holding space for a bunch of other humans and the lessons that we learn, and then the things that we experience and the skills that we develop in coaching in our professional life? What have you brought into being a dad? How is this translated over there?
I think that one of my core pieces is like being present. I could probably been accused of being a workaholic in the past, and like work's got to come first, like everything's got to be important. But what was important were like the little people sitting upstairs, right? Like, for example, today, before this, made my lunch, I was on another call, and my daughter's like, "You want to play Exploding Kittens? Because we just got an expansion pack of it." I'm like my initial reaction was going to be, "Oh, I got to get back to it." I was like, "No, that's exactly what I want to be doing right now. Let's do that." Had my lunch to the side, had an opportunity to spend 15 minutes with her, and it was that is what it's all about, is like being present and not being so reactionary too. I think like the biggest part that has changed over the last 15 years for me, as I've been a dad for 15 plus years now, is I'm nowhere near as reactionary. And I wish, like, if I could get in that time machine and go back 10 years, it would be like, "Hey dude, like, it's all going to be okay. You're going to get through this," because that was a challenging time. He would have been an ad about 10 years ago. And 2, slow fuck down. Be here. Like, be here. Like, you can worry about the money, you can worry about the work, all you want, but ask yourself, when was the last time any of it got to that point that you couldn't make more of it or get another piece of work? It always comes. You've got the skills, but this time with your kids, that's limited. And I think that's a big thing that I've realized too, is just like, time is not on my side for that. They're growing up. I've got a 15-year-old, 14-year-old, 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old. Like, we've got limited amounts of Christmases and limited amount of summer breaks left before there are none. And like being able to be okay with like, summer doesn't need to be work. And even like 2 years ago, I would have been like, I gotta work more. I gotta work more. Leave me alone until it's time to go to the park. It's just like, oh, you're right. It is a good time to go maybe grab a bubble tea or go run an errand. Let's go do this. And let's not worry about that other stuff. Be like, I'll fit the time in for work, or I won't. And I'll make that commitment. And I manage my work commitments in a way different way to ensure that I can have the opportunity to be present and to do some fun stuff with them now.
Yeah. I'm glad you said all that out loud, because it's part of the reason why I decided to do this podcast, was to just have conversations around this kind of topic and just get the perspective of all people, so that I can understand what it means to be a more conscious, mindful, present parent myself too, knowing that I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to have days where I'm going to feel the stress and the pressure and everything, and I'm going to do the wrong thing that I should have done some different, you know, and that's okay. And that's okay. But it's just about recognizing it and noticing those moments. And you hear people, you know, you see, usually it's older people when you go to the grocery store or whatever, of like, "Oh, I remember that age. Enjoy every moment of this." Right? It happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yep.
But do we actually let it land and feel it for real?
I didn't used to. Like, I know, like I would get that all the time. Be like, "Oh, this is a great time." And it's just like, Oh yeah, of course. It's like asking an entrepreneur, how's business going? Oh, it's going great. There's fire everywhere, right? And they're just saying it's going great to shut you up and to move you along because they don't feel that it's going great. And the same thing with when you get that as having young ones, be like, it is hard work and it's rewarding work, and if you let it, it's going to teach you so much more about yourself than you're ever going to teach them. And I think on that teaching component, the one thing that I've really started to realize is it's not about what I can teach. It's not taught, it's caught. So they're going to catch how I am being. They're going to see all that. They used to see the dad who was reactionary, who would get mad, who would be like all over the map. Like, and I'm probably sure that was a real challenging spot sometimes to be in for them. Now it's just like, oh, if we ask dad for his time, he's going to give it. Well, where might that then trickle down into their life? Like, where will they then give that time to somebody else instead of being rushed for everything and still having responsibilities and some discipline around certain commitments and everything else? It's like, it's okay to have a commitment and to be able to say no, but how about we say no and then we'll discuss when we can, I can do this later. Right? Like my no's no longer for them are always just a no. It's just like, well, I can't do that now. But let's, how about after supper or fill in the blank? And that can show up in other places too, right? That's a powerful place to start to be in. Because I think a lot of people that, client-wise, they come from a place of problem solving, probably overcommitting to yes and saying yes to things that they should be saying no to, and just learning to be like, hey, no is a powerful word. No protects your bucket. You got a bucket that you can fill with yeses. And if your yeses are spilling out everywhere else, be like, well, those are wasted yeses. So that no kind of protects it as well. And that I think can help show up in all forms, right? Especially as a parent.
Man, you're just leading my question from one to the next here, because I got another one that just came to mind here. And it's actually along the lines of what you started with earlier too, where you saying like your questions have evolved. Because I'm looking at my questions here too and thinking, maybe I should go down this train of thought here with Gene and just ask him these questions. And I was like, no, because we just literally said that, like, let's evolve. Let's push into the next realm. And then I thought, what is the question that I could ask Gene that's, maybe even kind of makes me a little uncomfortable to ask, because I don't know what the answer is going to be, or if it's something that you're even comfortable in talking about. So I'm going to try this with you if you're game for it.
All right. Let's be uncomfortable together.
Let's do it. So the thing that came to mind though, man, was, we've had an incredible conversation already just up until now. And we've spoken a lot about the lessons that we've learned and the things that, we serve other people with. And there's a lot of inspiring pieces to all of it. And for me, I know most recently I've had to really kind of just put the mirror on myself and go, where am I misaligned or out of integrity with what I'm saying and how I'm actually showing up and who I'm being? Where are you misaligned or out of integrity in your life right now?
Oh, Trevor, that hits in the soft spot. Oh, man. That's interesting because I've really pulled back from doing stuff online for the last little bit for that exact reason. Is like, what am I doing it all for? Am I just sitting up here preaching, not living the fullness of it and experiencing that pullback and going, oh, am I impacting my business? Like, oh, personal brand, blah, blah, blah. Be like, I got to this point of like, no, fuck that. Like, I don't care anymore. I am going to wait until I'm done exploring who I am. And it's been this big shift of like, who am I being versus what am I doing? I see a counselor. I am doing the work and trying to pull the layers back of like, where are all these stories coming from? And like, where's this been the biggest challenge? For me, like the misalignment right now has been around, building my business. It's like I've got some great clients, both in the form of Canadian Men's Health as a foundation to be in there as like their part-time jack of all trades. And I'm super enjoying that, doing this coaching thing, being a dad. And it's just like, who am I through all of this? Where's the stickiness? And finding that I think I had a lot of places where I thought I had complaints, and I'm starting to realize, oh, I didn't give a voice to myself. Those are like things I didn't have the courage, the confidence to make a request in. And slowly I'm like sitting with that. And that took like 3-4 months of like really sitting with it and really like kind of pulled myself back from a lot of things in life to go, when I re-show up, I want to be not this facade. In years past, I would wear masks. Like I had a mask for every occasion. And like, I think I'm finally getting to the end of that pile of masks. And they're the most like oldest and terrifying ones to get rid of, going, who am I without them? And putting them down on the ground finally, and just kind of like doing a Marie Kondo with it, be like, you do not spark me joy anymore. And stepping into that, right? It's like, I could talk about money, I could talk about being a father, being a husband, being a coach, being all these things. And like, there's a component of it, I would say in the last, probably about 3 months ago, there was like, how could I be a coach if I'm struggling with all this stuff? And I've gotten to the point going, I think you shared it at the beginning of this, is like, this is somebody else's survival guide, right? The things that we've been through. There's some stuff on our family side is just like, I laughed at the start of the year going, man, that was tough, and just had me like literally sitting down here crying. But then the next day I'm just like, this is going to make a hell of a TED Talk when we're ready to actually process and get through all this. Is like, I can get through this. So maybe somebody else can too, if I'm brave enough to share some of these challenges with inside.
Well, I like the way that went. And I appreciate you, man, for going there too, even because, like I say, the initial kind of uncomfortableness, even for me on that, is it's a call up, right? The question like that is like, let's speak the truth here, because, you know, if I was to be asked the same question, there's a lot of things where I would answer very similar to you. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, people that have been in this business, in the game for a while too, have a very similar story, which is so driven. Sometimes it's from a place of like, I'll fucking show ya. And other times it's from a place of like, whatever, the opposite of that, you know, like, of course I am. And then there's almost an arrogance to it. But getting to the place where you can actually recognize that there's more to this life than just your influence and your impact and your business and your finances and all of that, but there's actually all these other layers, and you don't need to sacrifice one for the other, but you do need to find the way that you can kind of go in and out of each and find a way to combine them together too. That's a lot of people get stuck there. They really do.
Oh, big time. You know, as you're talking about that, you know, where my biggest misalignment, I think this is a clear answer now, is I spoke about harmony, like how we need things to be in harmony. It's not about balance. And I've realized I was in that process of like speaking to a future state, not having and working to live into it. Now I'm getting to the point that I recognize what harmony means and how to harmonize all those pieces instead of just being in harmony with myself. Woo, but like, it's actually, to be in harmony is with multiple pieces of instrument or people, right? Like harmony comes from one or more, from more than one. So how do I be in harmony and harmonize with life, and to make multiple songs out of life and all the harmony, and harmonize with the people that are around me? I had this today, this quote, I actually just wrote it on my board, is like, make songs, not noise.
Huh. I like that. That was a good that's going to be a little quote clip we'll pull out. I always like the music analogies, right? Because there's something about that. I'm finding now that I'm stepping into even the way that I do my podcast and the structure of this. I'm attracting a lot more people that speak about this dynamic between being creative and actually creating your reality too. And and music and just art and that type of thing. And where my brain might have in the past went like, yeah, art's cool. You know, I like to put stuff on the walls. I'm like, no, art is a feeling, and it's a surrender to the feeling that actually is already within you that you can then express into the world and other people can feel. And it's like, when you find people like that speak that way, that, you know, create songs instead of noise, dude, that's inspiring.
Yeah, that's a place to, like you say, to inspire to, right? Like a future state to grow to. And I think it's the beautiful component of that is like, it's something that you can hold on to, but you can never actually truly get there, right? Because there's always going to be this growth, this energy change within it, and something new to explore and find in it. It's like, I would add it to one of the be grateful, be curious, be brave statements. It's this guideline. It's this place of being. Can I be creative? Can I be a creative and part of a creator?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the Braving the Wilderness book by Burdett, the last chapter is amazing, man. Like, I listened to the whole book, and then the last chapter, I was like, oh my God, I should have just skipped to the end here. But she speaks about this in a way that allows you to kind of visualize it, right? Of people operating their life in this state of like, oh, there's got to be more, and I'm actively seeking that next level, and what is it? And you're kind of walking down this street that's lined with buildings, and at the end is this forest that you can either bravely step into or choose not to. And when you do actually step into it, it's almost like she opens the curtain. She says, what you find behind there are all of the people that are doing the thing that you're aspiring to do, which is they're truly expressing themselves. They are dancing. They are creating. They are all of those things. And you can almost visualize yourself there like, oh, I found it. But I didn't know they were here. And I was so scared to actually venture into the woods that I held myself back to actually go there. And yeah, I felt it, you know. I was like, oh, yeah, that's real. And I've experienced it too. And our cold plunge that we did was just another piece of that, right? You jump in the river with people that are like, yeah, I'll do this, and feel the fear and the everything, because like it wasn't comfortable for you. I know it wasn't, man. We got it all on video.
Well, I still remember. I can still like vividly remember stepping into that water, going, "Let's do this," and that cold water hitting my shins, going, and everything in my body going, "Get out of here! Find a way to get out of here! Just do it!" Be like, "No! Oh my God! They're still calling me in. We're still doing this." Sitting on the rock, dive in, and then like as soon as we sat into that water, we're here. There was no getting out of it. And then we ended up sitting for 10 minutes having a beautiful conversation. Know, right? Like that is like a play, like 10 minutes of what initially started as discomfort. The first 30 seconds to a minute was like high levels going, oh my God, this is not what we're used to. Plunge into it for 10 minutes. 10 minutes in anything that makes you uncomfortable. Within reason, of course, be safe about this, but like within reason is going to change your view, and you're going to get something from it. I think even when we sat down, it was just like, oh man, we're going to get something from this. And that's still a piece that I take with me today, is like hearing, whenever I hear that voice in my body, like that's the best way I can describe it. It's like it was beyond just the little saboteur screaming. He was like out of control. He's like, oh, I'm out of here. Like all the voices up there. It was just something in my body. It was like, oh my God. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It's the same metaphor for all of this stuff. And if anybody doesn't know what we're actually talking about, start with the cold plunge. Jump in with us. It's because it's a great analogy when you actually get through it and you're kind of like, whoa, right? And then you start hearing stories like we're talking about venturing into the wilderness and kicking this door open, because it's kind of ethereal at first. People are like, what are you guys talking about? But when you experience it, you just know. And at the same time, you don't. And it's so frustrating and irritating and scary and every other word you could think of.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I always think of like people ask, oh, what's coaching like? But even thinking about taking this plunge into the uncomfortableness, like taking a cold plunge is like, it's like trying to explain what hot water is if somebody's never experienced it. Once they sit in the hot tub, they're like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Sometimes, like, I think the challenge, the request here today is like, go spend 10 minutes in that uncomfortable thing daily. Like 10 minutes. Find out, be open to finding out what that is. And it can be anything in your life. And we all know that we have something uncomfortable that we need to sit with we could easily sit with for 10 minutes.
And dude, you just led me into my last question, which is so perfect again too. But I find from my own personal experience, and maybe others can relate to this, and maybe even you too, but I've been guided and instructed to sit for 10 minutes in silence. I've been guided to sit for 10 minutes and reflect on questions and journal. And for a long time, I've told myself stories of like, I don't got time for this, or like, how am I going to get anything out of sitting in silence for 10 minutes? And, you know, one of the exercises that I'm doing now is to do a daily expression of gratitude. And that's my last question for you, because I know the power of this, you know, to sit in the uncomfortable of like, you're going to write what you are grateful for the next 10 minutes. And you're going to hit a point where you're like, what else am I grateful for? And that's uncomfortable, right? It doesn't have to always be the extremes of like jumping out of a plane or jumping into cold water. Sometimes even trying to find the beauty in the midst of the chaos or the storm can be very, very, growing, uplifting.
I think there's the question right there. It's like, where was the beauty today? Like sitting with that for 10 minutes. Like that ties back to the gratefulness. Is like, gratitude is, you know, it's been a big part of my own exploration. I think I would say, based on my Facebook memories, about 10 years ago, I started writing what I was grateful for posts, because I was so tired of all the things I was seeing on social media and on media, period, online. It's just like, why don't I plant one seed, see what that does for me? I spent years writing those online. Now I just write them in my own journal and explore it and find ways to grow from it. Now it's like 5 things I'm grateful for every night is like a great place to end my day. I've added on to it to write about like, what's my prime emotion? What's the prime emotion I felt for that day? And just recently I've added on to it is like, what is the wish for tomorrow me? So like trying to bless myself for tomorrow.
Love that, man. I didn't actually ask you the question, so I'll ask you here now. What is the one thing that you're most grateful for right now in this moment?
Your uncomfortable question. Right? I'm grateful for that because it was an opportunity for us to share and show what it means to have that open space. And I'm for nobody watches this or a ton of people watch this. I'm grateful that we just got to experience that together. Because now where can that take our questions as we leave here and interview more people and talk and support more people? Where else might we be just a little bit more brave than we were today?
I'm just holding the silence for us now, man, because that's exactly what needed to be said. And I'm glad that you said it out loud, because that's really what it is. It's just a bravery to step into the conversation or ask the questions that others are not willing to either speak to or speak into, right? Or express themselves. So that was awesome, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on the show here and having kind of an open-ended question with no set agenda or any kind of titles discussed or preconceived or anything like that. And just kind of trusting.
I love it. I love doing these shows. So no, man, this was a great conversation and just adds on to, I'm very appreciative of being invited onto your show to have this and to spend the last hour just digging. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it kind of speaks to the uncomfortable question that you were just referencing, which is, I truly believe that everybody has a voice and an opportunity to create change in this world, you know, to be a change maker. And it's not some big dramatic thing like, you know, we don't have to be the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa to do it either. You can start with yourself and you reflecting on the fact that you wanted to figure out who you are and really go deep on that before you started expressing out to the world and preaching things. I think that's powerful, man, for you to actually speak that out loud. And then also realize, though, the world needs you, man. It needs your voice and it needs you to speak out loud. Because I said it to you when I first met you that, you know, not everybody you meet speaks from a perspective where you're kind of like, damn, okay, all right, I'm going to go think about that a little bit. But when you do find them, I know that that's what I'm here to do, is to help amplify the voices of people like that. So I'm glad that we got to have this conversation, man.
Likewise, and I appreciate that you've built this platform for sharing those voices, because sometimes we all need a little kick in the ass to remind ourselves to get up there and get playing.
Yeah, step onto the field, man. Let's go get smacked around a little bit. I know you got a son that's pretty active football player, and pretty good one at that too, right?
He is, yes.
Awesome.
Very much so.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you. Tell everybody how they can find out more about you, witness and experience the live show, all that kind of fun stuff.
All right. So the company name is Peeled Back. It's PEALED back. So it's actually an acronym for my kids, Presley, Elliot, Alice, and Logan. And that's why it's spelled wrong. Or it's spelled right, actually.
Exactly how it should be.
So you find me at peeledback.com, LinkedIn, YouTube. That's where you can find the live cast. And my musings are, and most of my time is spent on LinkedIn. And you'll find me as Gene Bernier on LinkedIn.
Cool. I'll make sure it's all linked up so that people can find you. And yeah, man, I appreciate you again. And thank you. You know, you having Mike and I on your show as well, I think was another really foundational piece to what we created together with the retreat and what it's now spinning into as well. So I know when Mike and I got done that interview, we were like, whoa, that's going to be a part of the 10-year story when we look back. Do you remember that interview we did with Gene? Like, look at this, man. Look at what we created.
Look at the trajectory.
So
I think it was either you or Mike after that show were like, oh, we finally put to words what we've been trying to say.
Exactly. And you created that, man. You stepped into the space and asked the questions that allowed us to go deep. So you got the gift. Keep going deeper. So appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it, brother. All right. Well, thank you so much. We'll talk to you, everybody else, soon. Thanks Trevor.
We'll see ya. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Trevor Turnbull Show. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please consider subscribing on my YouTube channel, as well as on your favorite podcast platform. So until next time, remember, today is a beautiful day of opportunity. Trust that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. So be grateful, be curious, and be brave.